What's up, guys? It's Drew with Downrange Thermal. Yesterday, I packed up and left our showroom in Spicewood, drove all the way to Dallas. I met Cameron, who owns Night Solutions. He's been doing a lot of night vision for us. We sat down and we went over everything that I could think of about night vision. Stay tuned.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So we fixed what, 4 sets of 1431s already?
Yeah, some bad resistors, so easy enough.
For sure. So tell me a little bit about your business.
I own Night Solutions, do a lot of night vision building and manufacturing, not necessarily manufacturing components, but building night vision units, repairing night vision units. So these days, not a whole lot of retail, mainly just building and repairing stuff.
Right, and then that's where Downrange Thermal comes in as the the dealer there. So how'd you get into this, dude?
Really, I got into it coming out of college. I didn't have any money and, was shooting a lot of hogs and wanted night vision. And so at that time, I was able to buy a tube and was able to buy a PVS 14 kit. And that's
so the first night vision you ever had, you built?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think like $1,000 in it, but that was the only way I could afford it. So I figured that out. And then ever since then, I've just, kept messing with it.
Mm-hmm. And that was a green Gen 2 or something?
Yeah, it was I can't remember what kind of tube it was, but it was in one of the old. It was an old ITT like search and rescue housing. It was actually an orange housing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Do you still have it?
No.
No,
That was probably 15 years ago. So.
Yeah, totally. How'd you learn all this stuff?
Trial and error.
Just completely self-taught.
Yeah, I mean, it's an expensive way to learn, but it's the best way to learn. I mean, when you make mistakes, you pay for it. Believe me.
Yeah, you got to pay the tuition, but it's certainly hard to make the same mistake over and over.
Yeah, but it's been good, and there's a lot to learn with it. But I mean, gone from everywhere from repotting tubes to building units to just all types of stuff. So
right.
It's fun.
So I know with night vision, you've got photons and electrons and stuff. How does it really work?
Really, the best way you can think about it is it is turning light into an electrical signal, then amplifying that electrical signal, and then turning the electrical signal back into light again.
That's a great way to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
And how much does it amplify it?
Depends on the type of tube. Generally speaking, like a Gen 3 tube, you're anywhere from, now some of the new like UMH tubes maybe a little bit more, but generally speaking like 60 to 65,000 times.
Wow.
Gen 2 tubes like Photonis stuff, you're 10 to 15,000 times.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So other than the amount of intensity, what really is the difference, maybe from a mechanical perspective, from Gen 2 to Gen 3?
Well, it's completely different technology, but I wouldn't necessarily say like one is better than the other. They've got, and when I'm saying this, like you have to keep in mind, like there's a wide range of Gen 2 devices. Like if you're comparing like a harder tube, or if you're comparing, a China, some of the newer Chinese stuff, like the NNVT tubes, are actually pretty decent for what they are.
Wow.
But
that's in like the Jerry 31s?
Yeah. I mean, you top out like they're like 22, 21 SNR, so they're not super high performance, but they're pretty clean, and you get a pretty good image out of them. So like if you start going out and it's really, really dark, they're going to struggle. But that's kind of the problem with all Gen 2 tubes, right? Like even a really good like 33 SNR Photonis tube, if you took that and compared that to a 33 SNR unfilm tube, or even a 33 SNR thin film tube, in really low light situations, the thin film and the unfilm tube is going to blow that out of water. Where you start seeing like some of the Photonis stuff do better is when you have a little bit higher light. So like if you're in urban scenarios, you'll get a lot higher resolution out of those than you will generally speaking, out of a Gen 3 tube. They have better highlight resolution. The other thing they kind of hang their hat on is ultra fast auto gating. I'm not really sure, like to a normal person, how much that matters. So I wouldn't really like say that's a huge deal or reason why to buy it. But the other application where I've seen that it can be helpful is like with a lot of law enforcement, especially if you are in urban scenarios and you know you're going to be around a lot of lights. They cut down on bloom quite a bit. Halo tends to be, or not just the halo values you see on the spec sheets, but the actual halo to your eye seems to be a lot less. So like if you had a suspect that was standing under some type of really bright light source, some type of really low HPS light or something like that. A lot of times with photonist stuff, you're going to be able to see them pretty clearly, where you might not necessarily be able to see that person with a really high spec unfilm tube. You can get a lot of bloom, but there are some like very niche scenarios where like a photonist tube would be better. Another one is a lot of long range shooters like them, and they'll use them in
as a clip-on. Wow.
They use them in clip-ons because generally speaking, like if you're not doing like any like peer-to-peer type of stuff, most long-range shooters are using an illuminator anyway.
Sure.
And so you'll see if you're not necessarily worried about passive aiming and not giving away like where your position is, then photonists can be a pretty good option because they've got higher resolution and they perform better under high light. So if you're using an illuminator anyway, they can be good for clip-ons.
Does Knights use photonists in their 30s?
They do make photonists. Yeah, Knights is one of the few manufacturers that makes photonist versions.
Oh wow, that's fascinating.
I don't believe it's regular production. I could be wrong. I don't believe they're regular production, but there's a lot of Knights photonist units hanging out or floating around out there.
So for you, being definitely an expert, what are some things that you just hear that's totally invalid, that's a total myth?
I mean, I don't know. There's I would say generally speaking, like a lot of people are way too concerned about like light as it relates to how it'll damage a tube. Yeah. No, I would not say like if you took one of these tubes right now, I mean they're auto gated, and you turned it on in here right now, and you left it on for 30 seconds, a minute, you're not really going to damage it. Now, I wouldn't, keep in mind, like, I'm not saying don't do that regularly. Like, don't go walk outside and turn your night vision on. It's just stupid. But, like, if you were to walk into a building and the lights were on and you were on there for, in there for a minute, like, it's not really going to damage them. What's going to damage a tube really, really fast is not necessarily the amount of light, but, like, the intensity of the light. Mm-hmm. So if you took that same tube and walked in here and looked at the floor for 30 seconds, no big deal. If you took that same tube and pointed it up at that light and left it there for 30 seconds, you could burn it. Mm-hmm. So it's more the intensity of the light than it is, the light level. But once again, like I will stress, like I'm not saying to do that. It is pretty good. It's pretty good practice. Like if you can turn off your stuff, to turn it off. What's up?
You ready to be blasted?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, is it ready to go?
Yeah, dude, send it.
Are you gonna pinch the slide with the tape, or how do you want me to do that?
Oh, we'll just do that after you blast it.
Okay.
Thanks, bro.
Come on.
Are you on our video? Cool. Go on now.
Come on.
Yeah, so people definitely get a little obsessed about not having light around their nods, and for the most part, I think that is safe, but I feel the same way. They can be around a little bit of light. And what about certain types of light, like condensant versus LED or something like that?
It's really the brightness. Like some stuff, like a laser, will damage your tube immediately. But yeah, once again, like I would not recommend like don't go turn your stuff on and walk outside. But like if you were to go, especially like in law enforcement applications where it matters, where it's like if you were to walk into a house and lights flipped on, like don't worry about turning on your night vision. Pay attention to what's going on there first. You're not going to damage your night vision. Yeah. But if you have the opportunity to turn it off, do that.
Another one that I've heard is the aim laser bouncing off the wall or bouncing off of glass. That'll damage it for sure.
1,000,000%.
Oh yeah.
1,000,000%. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I had one customer that bought several sets of night vision because he's building a shoot house on the West Coast. And about 6 months later, he called me and said that, the tubes were damaged. And he thought it was a manufacturing problem. And when he sent them back to me, they were all laser burns. Mm-hmm. And that's what was happening is they were using lasers in these shoot houses with sim rounds and burned all of them.
And even if you put the safety screws in there, it's still not safe on the nods.
Man, I wouldn't try it.
Right.
I can't promise you that it would damage it, but it's not good for it.
Yeah.
It's definitely not good for it. If to the extent that if you're ever doing anything like that, it doesn't matter what the laser is, you need to be using an LIF. I don't really recommend LIFs for much else. It's a light interference filter.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't usually keep them, but yeah, it's basically you'll notice them like when you're looking at it. It's like a filter that goes on the inside of the front glass, and it almost looks metallic.
Okay.
And that's what that's for, is to keep you from damaging the tubes from lasers.
Wow. I had no idea. So it would be like a silver metallic or a gold kind of color?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's like a metallic looking gold, silverish color, yeah, depending on how the light hits it.
And then to circle back on auto gating, how does that work?
So auto gating is basically like, you can think of it as a circuit protection technology for the tube. So when it has a bright light source in it, it'll choke down the power of the tube so it doesn't damage itself.
On the gain of it?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
wow.
It'll stop it.
Interesting.
Yeah, stop it from damaging itself.
And the human eye can't really see that?
You can absolutely see it.
Okay,
A lot of
so
people,
when it's doing its little flutter thing, like I've looked at my phone before with night vision, and it seems a little fluttery, it's auto gating there?
No, so usually what you're seeing there is actually your phone. So like your phone has, usually phones have like an IR, like light on them. And it'll use that to notice, like, you know, if you were to keep your phone down and you turned it up, how it turns
no
bright.
way.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
So you'll notice, like, a lot of times, like, if you wear night vision, say, for example, if you're at a shooting range, if you're wearing night vision, look around and you'll see in a lot of people's pockets, their phone will be flooded.
Really? I've
Yeah.
never noticed that. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, like, if you're out hunting or something and you lost your phone, if you can get up high enough, you can normally find it by just looking around because you'll see it fluttering. But
Well, if they didn't get anything else from the video, they can find their phone.
yeah, I mean, so
That's
that's
crazy.
that's usually from that. Like most of the time, now Photonus is a little bit different story. Like Photonus, some of those tubes will flutter when they're auto gating.
Mine are Photonus, yes.
Okay, yeah, so that can be the auto gating of the tube. Generally speaking, you're not going to see that on L3 or Elbit tubes, but Photonus will do it.
And what will you see when they're auto gating?
It'll just dim down.
Like somebody took the gain and turned it way down.
Correct. That's why a lot of people will call it like automatic brightness control. It's not automatic brightness control. It's auto gating.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's where you get some housings that have more of an auto gate wind than others.
That's not the housing. That's the tube.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
the tube.
that's the
you're hearing.
tube. And to be honest, I don't know why that happens. I assume it's something with the power supply. I don't know. L3 ones, you get it a little bit, like you'll get it on startup now. Elbit, you don't tend to hear it, but like there's some of them, like especially on some of the older PVS 15s with ITT tubes in them, like those things would whine super loud, like the entire night. And to the extent where some people are just annoyed with them. So.
Wow. So ITT, they're gone now?
Well, I mean, yes, there's really only been 2 night vision companies in the United States. And that's how it's always been. They just change hands and change names. So is ITT gone? Like, no, it's still around. I mean, it's the L3 Harris manufacturing facility now.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how all that stuff
I
happened.
understand. So you have L3 and then Elbit and then Photonus, right?
Right,
Okay.
or yeah, that's the current iterations, yeah.
Sure, but of course Photonus is Gen 2 Plus, which is there a difference between Gen 2 and then the Plus? Is that just resolution?
No, it's performance. I mean, generally I would say it's the SNR is probably the biggest determinant of that. And Gen 2 Plus, there's really no like, there's not, I'm sure there probably is, like if you could get into their IP and figure out like what they do to make their tubes. But there's really no like technology difference between that and like some of the Russian stuff. It's just whatever they're doing, they make their tubes a lot higher performance than they do. So that's why I was saying you can't just compare Gen 2, because like
Right.
if you go get a Gen 2 Russian tube and compare that to a Photonus tube, they're light years away.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
Which one's better?
Photonus.
Okay,
Way better.
that's good.
Way better. And now, I mean, like I said, some of the new Norenco NNVT tubes, like they're pretty decent for the money, but they're like a Photonus commercial tube in terms of performance. So like if you wanted to call those a Gen 2 Plus, like they're at the very, very like low end of performance-wise, what I would call something that's a Gen 2 Plus. But I mean, the other issue with the Chinese tubes is you don't really know, like on paper, Photonus has the shortest lifespan. Now keep in mind, like it's
Really?
Yeah, on paper it does. Now
Okay.
keep in mind that like even, you know, I mean a Gen 3 tube and even a Photonis tube, like dude, you'd be able to use it for the rest of your life and not really have any issues. But yeah, you don't really know yet, like the Chinese stuff, it hasn't been out long enough. You don't really know what the longevity
yeah.
of it is.
Yeah, that's
and even
exactly right.
yeah, and even and not just the actual tube burning up, but like how long do the power supplies last? Because that tends to be, in my experience, the Achilles heels of most tubes. If they fail, it's usually the power supplies. And some manufacturers definitely have a higher failure rate of power supplies than other manufacturers do.
Power supplies not meaning the batteries?
No, there's a power supply on the inside of the tube.
Okay. Talk
Yeah.
to me about that a little bit.
So if you were to take this apart, basically if you cut this metal piece, on the inside of this it's basically, you can see there's a module, which is
Yep.
the image intensifier module, and then it fits into a ring that's down here, and that ring down here is the power supply.
Oh, wow, fascinating.
And so, yeah, that is soldered to, it is soldered to the module, and then that's all potted in a vacuum. So basically that's to keep anything from arcing in there. You can also, like if you're testing them, you can test them in mineral oil too. So like you can take the power, or you can take the intensifier module out of there, submerge it in mineral oil, then physically attach it to a power supply, so you don't have to like go through and repot the entire tube. But at least that way you can turn it on under mineral oil and you won't get any arcing and damage the tube, and see if it works. But yeah, so there's a power supply in here. So when people talk about a power supply, that's what that is. Generally, when people are talking about something inside of a housing, it's a battery pack,
Sure.
kind of the terminology. I mean, these are, you know, this isn't a battery pack like a PVS 14, but these are replaceable in the same way. The electronics are a little bit different, but yeah.
I'm following you. And the power supply in the tube, is that more than a capacitor? It's closer to a battery?
No, it's not a battery. It doesn't hold any.
Okay.
No, it doesn't hold any power. I mean, the power is all external on them, but yeah, more closer to a capacitor.
Wow, interesting. So inside the tube, talking Gen 3 stuff, you've got a photocathode and then the microchannel plate, and what else is going on in there?
Yeah, then you also have an output screen. So that's generally what's happening is you have the photocathode that's bringing in the light. Then it is then converting it into electrons that's shooting against the microchannel plate, which is then amplifying it and is then converting it back into photons that are coming out on the output plate.
And so in highlight environments, you'll see the chicken wire type stuff, which is the microchannel plate as you're looking through the knots.
Yeah, that's a result of manufacturing, because you think about it, basically what they're doing on a microchannel plate, you start out with a piece of glass and then it's just being drawn and drawn and drawn and drawn. And
Really?
so, yeah, so you can think of it as, you know, I don't know how many, I mean, if it's 100,000, whatever it may be, of all those pieces of glass that are put together. And so the way that it's a little bit, it's almost a little bit about, or kind of how, like, if you've ever watched the stuff, I'm not, obviously not like a nuclear physicist, but like kind of how the same way that it works with atom bombs, how when it's bouncing against the wall, or the atoms are bouncing against the wall, that it's, you know, creating more or whatever that is. But that's the same thing that's happening here. So you have each one of those tubes, and as it's bouncing against the wall, it's creating more electrons.
Right, as they ricochet off the sides, right. And is that where the money is in tubes, is the microchannel plate? And the phosphor?
I mean, the microchannel plates are important. Microchannel plates, like right now, I mean, the L3 technology, that's why their technology is, that's at least part of what they will publicly say, is making their technology better. They're looking at thinner microchannel plates, and the thinner microchannel plates are allowing them to, basically allowing them to get more amplification. They're getting
super
higher,
gain.
yeah, they're getting higher gain, and they're also able to get higher resolution.
Cool.
Now the trade-off with that is, at least on paper, that a thinner microchannel plate should be more fragile. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're not that fragile, or they wouldn't be, you know, they wouldn't be sending them out to SOCOM and whoever they're sending them out to. But yeah.
Okay. And how long do average night vision tubes last?
If you take care of them, I mean, your whole life, as long as there's not some type of major issue with them.
Sure, but as far as turning them on and their lifespan of runtime? Because if you Google it, it says about 5,000 hours.
No, it should be more than that.
Okay.
I want to say mean time to failure is like 10,000.
10,000 hours.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's just mean time. So I mean, that's where they start degrading. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it's much more than that.
Okay, that's good to know.
But yeah, I mean, practically speaking, like, dude, there's like those PVS 7s over there from '91, and they still work just
Right.
fine. You know.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Getting into Elbit versus L3, of course, it's thin filmed versus unfilmed. What does that mean?
It's just different technology. I'm not exactly sure what goes into L3's manufacturing processes that make it different, because it's not technically an unfilmed tube. I mean, I don't know why they call it that. It still has a film on it, but yeah, the end result is that you have an unfilmed technology. You have a tube that performs much better in low light.
Okay.
And it's just really, and all things equal, right? Like, I'm sure you could find some outliers of like, hey, I've got this, 25 SNR unfilmed tube, and I've got a 35 SNR thin film tube, and maybe like it would be better. But generally speaking, like, the unfilmed just blows everything else out of the water. It's the best performing in low light.
Okay.
I will say that, me personally, like, unfilmed is the best. L3 unfilmed is the best. If I was getting a thin film tube, I'd probably get an Elbit tube. They just overall seem to be a little higher performing on the thin film side. But that's just there's nothing scientific behind that. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
I got you. And then, other than the tube, we've got the front lens and the rear lens. What's going on there?
There's a bunch of different options for those, different coatings, a lot of stuff that goes into them. And yeah, it definitely has an impact on the performance of your tube. I mean, you've got a lot of different things that light have to pass through in order for it to get from the front of you to your eye. And so, obviously a lesser quality lens is going to have less light. You can also get edge distortion. You can get wave effects, even to the point where some of them, like, you can get larger halos, larger light halos. So, a lot of that stuff is proprietary, like coatings and all that. They won't really tell you what they use to coat them. Different manufacturers won't, which it's part of their TDP, so I understand. But yeah, there's certainly ones that stand out above the others. I mean, some applications don't matter. Like, honestly, like if you're using for like thermal devices, right? So like a lens on a thermal device, if you've got a lens on the rear of a thermal device, like, it really doesn't have to be the best type of glass in the world, as long as you don't have a bunch of distortion, because you have adjustable light that's coming out anyway. But for a night vision device, it absolutely matters.
And what are the options?
Generally speaking, like in America, you really have Carson, which Carson isn't a OEM. They source glass from elsewhere too, which right now the majority of the Carson glass I've been getting is Fujinon, which is pretty good. But generally speaking, the mil spec options is Fujinon and Q-Optic. And you'll see those, like I said, all over the place. Carson's probably the single largest supplier of those, and depending on when you get glass from them or where you get glass from them, it's going to be one of those two.
Preferred?
I prefer the Fujinon eyepieces for the fronts. I don't really care.
Okay.
They're both good. Then you have some other ones like AAPO, which is out of Singapore. I'm not positive the glass is made in Singapore, but that's where it's shipped from. Which is, the front glass is okay, the rear glass not that great. That's the same stuff that's used by, it's Avamo, same company that Apache uses. Like I said, front glass is, it's okay, but the rear glass I wouldn't recommend. There's another U.S. company that's making glass now called Salvo. They're making eyepieces. They make an acrylic eyepiece and a glass eyepiece. The acrylic eyepiece, I'm not super impressed with. The glass eyepiece is pretty decent for the money. As long as you're clear about it and you're not selling it as it hasn't been tested for mil spec, or hasn't been through any mil spec testing, but as long as you're clear with what you're selling, it's fine. But I've been happy with that glass. Those are, some of the biggest ones you'll see. Then also there's the other large one you'll see in the U.S. is Optronics Engineering, which is it's an Israeli company. I'm not sure where they may make it in Israel, but the thing you'll figure out about glass is that it's really very seldom is like the country of origin actually where it's made.
Interesting.
And a lot of times, like you'll see glass that's, for example, like Singapore, where there's a lot of like really high quality glass that comes from Singapore, but the standards for something to be made in Singapore are to be labeled as made in Singapore are very, very low.
Interesting.
And I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's like something like 10% of the materials have to actually come from Singapore, and it has to be assembled there.
Wow.
So like a lot of these places, a lot of them use these places to, I wouldn't say like intentionally mask the origin, but you can't really be sure that it's actually produced there. But yeah, same thing with optronics. I'm not exactly sure. It's an Israeli company. Maybe it's made in Israel, maybe it's not, but it's generally pretty low quality.
Yeah, that makes
Generally
sense.
pretty low quality.
So I've been trying to teach people as much as I can about night vision, and I'll separate night vision units kind of in two categories. One category being a assembled unit, so somebody like you gets components and then they build it, or something that came factory, probably as you would call OEM. So you have 31As, which are super popular, 1531s, and of course, PVS 14s, provided they were from L3 and not tampered with. Those are probably all going to be fairly comparable. What are some of the other housings and other assembled units? You've got the katanas, the 1431s, the new units that we probably shouldn't bring up yet, and then those older katanas. What are some other housings? And obviously, you're pretty fond of 1431s.
Right now, there's a lot of it. There's never been more housings on the market than there is now. I mean, even 3 or 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it's like you had RNVGs, you had DTNVSs, like Mod 3s, and that was kind of like that's it. The 1431s were out at that point, but the first round of 1431s were pretty bad, and part of the issue is that 1431s are obviously they're made in China. China does not have access to U.S. tubes, nor do they I'm sure they do or somehow, but they don't really have access to the technology, so they don't understand what they're manufacturing.
Right.
It took a long time. Like for the first, I would say 2-3 years that the 1431s were out, I wouldn't touch them because it was not a good product. It's changed now. They're pretty good. They'll actually hold a purge. They'll collimate. Like everything's pretty good on them. They're waterproof.
They're lightweight.
Yeah, I mean it's a good.
They look good.
It's all the features that everybody wants at
IPD stops.
Yeah, at an affordable housing or at affordable price. Used to at the time when these came out, like if you wanted manual gain, I mean your options. Well, if you wanted manual gain and you wanted it to be articulating, there were PVS 31s or 1531s. That was it.
3 years ago.
Yeah, that was
Wow,
it. There was nothing else. So it's changed a lot. There's a lot of people, and I get it. There's a lot of people that don't want to buy Chinese housings, and that's fine. I mean, the good part about the night vision market is, at least these days, where like I would say for a long, long time, it was night vision was pretty much 100% geared towards law enforcement and military, and servicing those clients. Over the past, I would say since COVID has hit, it's really changed, and now there's a lot of people focusing on the consumer or the private consumers, and it's been good from the housing aspect because you've got a lot of companies now, like even some of the established ones like AB Night Vision, which is one of the best. They're one of the best manufacturers that there is for housings, and it's a lot of stuff you won't see unless you're building goggles. But if you get any AB Night Vision housing, like the machining on those is so perfect, the tolerances are so perfect. You drop tubes in there, you throw them onto a test set, you've got to turn the eyepieces like half a turn to one turn, and they're perfectly collimated. Like everything about those things.
And that's an aluminum housing, or?
So the Mod, I don't even know if they make the Mod 3s anymore, but the Mod 3s were some type of, I don't think it was Darlin, but it was some type of plastic with an aluminum bridge. Besides that, everything else is an aluminum housing, and then they're also, I don't know if they've announced it yet or not, but they have a PVS 14 housing that they're making that's aluminum that's pretty cool too.
From AB.
AB Night Vision.
Cool.
Yeah.
And money is no object, that would be your housing of choice?
No, I'm pretty partial to PVS 31s.
Well, as far as night vision that's being assembled.
I don't know. I mean, really, you have to really kind of talk to the customer and see what they're trying to do. So like it would, RNVGs are really good housings. It's a fixed bridge. They're obviously very durable.
They don't have IPDs, right?
Yeah, they do, because it's a worm drive interpupillary, same as this. So it's, in a roundabout way, it's got IPDs.
Okay, so when you're saying RNVG, you're not talking about the A RNVG?
Correct.
The A does not have IPD.
No, but but those have a user adjustable friction lock on them. So you don't really need that.
I understand.
You don't really need that. So yeah, I mean, if somebody wants an articulating goggle, I think those are great. The ARNVGs are great. Now you have a little bit more weight on them than something like a DTNVS or something like a 1431, but they're great. They don't have manual gain. 1431s have manual gain. DTNVS do not have manual gain. DTNVS is obviously a lightweight housing, so like you kind of have to figure out like what people want, and then you also have some other manufacturers now that are doing really good things like. Low Light Innovations, he's got the Arturnus, which is a fixed bridge system, which is a really good economical choice. Then he's got the LLULs, which I think are really cool for what they are. They're super light. Then he's coming out now with a magnesium housing that I haven't put my hands on one, but it seems to check all the boxes that everybody wants to. So we'll see how those come out. Then Nocturne Industries, which has the katanas, the Daiso bridges, the Tontos. They make a lot of cool stuff, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some other ones, but yeah, I mean there's a lot out there now. But really, it just comes down to talking to people and figuring out what they want. I do think that there's a big difference between obviously you have your law enforcement customers where those guys if hey, you might be putting your life on the line with this, you need to keep that in mind with what you're steering people towards. I do also think though that to me it can be frustrating sometimes if you get online and you hear people well, this housing is 3D printed and it's, not mil spec and it's not this and that. And it's well, dude, some people just want to fucking have fun. Yeah. Is it okay if somebody just gets something that's light and they think it's cool and they want to go walk around with it? There's there's nothing wrong with that. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why I think, especially on the commercial side, it's important to just figure out what people want, because there are so many options now that you don't have to be well, here's your 3 choices, you pick one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's good information for sure. And getting into fail points of night vision, other than tubes, and let's not even talk about electrical fail points because we had some bad resistors earlier. What are some really common physical fail points that you've seen?
Generally on any articulating housing, the hinges are going to be the fail points.
Yeah.
And you'll see that, I mean, across any of them. It doesn't matter what they are. Some are better than others. I would say the ARNVGs for an articulating housing are head and shoulders above any other housing that's out there that I've seen. Now, with that being said, Low Light Innovations is coming out with a magnesium housing that articulates, and Nocturne's coming out with, I don't know what it's made out of, but it's some type of metal alloy housing too. So
3D printed metal housing.
Is it 3D?
I assume it is. I know a lot of people are doing that for silencers.
Yeah, it could be, but they're both coming out with metal housing, so those could be just as durable as the ARNVG. And then when you go down from those, really, man, materially, DTNVSs, PVS 31s, 1431s, 1531s, they're all just about the same in terms of durability. None of them, if you turn your head and smack your head on a
pillar of a car,
real hard, you're probably going to snap one.
Yep, I've done it.
And some people freak out about that, and they're well, the durability. And it's I mean, I get that, but we also let's also keep in mind that these PVS 31s have been used by SOCOM for over a decade. If they were fragile, they wouldn't be using them, right? So they are durable enough.
Why are you so partial to the 31A as being the goggle of choice?
Man, I still just think it's the best technology that's out there. It's the lightest, it's the easiest to use. Obviously, for a lot of people, it wouldn't necessarily be the best, but for me, it is. So there are some people there are different type of. If you're in law enforcement, there's some reasons why you might not want it, depending on if you're buying it for yourself or if your department's getting it for you.
Because
or
the diopter being fixed.
the diopters, yeah. So I mean, that's what the 1531 was made to fix, right? So like if your department is not issuing goggles to individual officers, but they're issuing them to whoever's coming in that day, then a 1531 is probably better. But yeah, I mean,
That's a great point.
Yeah, well, that's what they were originally made for, was because they L3 had some. I want to say it was Department of Energy, but I could be wrong on that. But I believe it was Department of Energy, where they every time the officers would come in, they would check out goggles from the arms room, and like it was just too much for them to keep up with diopters for each one. So
Right.
you make an adjustable diopter model. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the 31s. I am a huge fan of 1531s. Both of the factory L3 options are great. They're sometimes their price, they're expensive. They're a little bit prohibitive for people. And then the other part is that you can't, they're not serviceable. They're not serviceable like by anybody that has a build shop or anything like that, which may or may not be a big issue for you. The difference is like if you break a 1431 or if you break a DTMVS, if by the
Cameron.
yeah, by the time I get my hands on it, like I can usually have it fixed in a day. If you have something with L3, like man, 30 days is like you'd be doing great to have it done in 30 days.
So a 31 and a 1531 are the only factory-made complete night vision units.
No, there's a lot more. There's a lot more. I mean, Photonis, I don't know Photonis' whole
from
lineup.
EOTech.
Yeah, Photonis has a lot of them. They've got all I think the PD Pro line. They've got a couple sets of quads.
Okay.
They've got a 18 millimeter and a 16 millimeter quad.
That's right. Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, and I don't remember what all, but Photonis has several. Obviously, EOTech has several. So does Elbit. Elbit's got several. They have the thermal fuse binocular. They've got Elbit has the 5032s, and these don't even cover the aviation goggles. Like I can't remember what they're called, but they make aviation goggles. L3 is the same way. L3 makes aviation goggles. And they've got ones that we really haven't even seen yet, like the Fuse quads. That this was the first time that, to my knowledge, they've shown them publicly. Like there's been some pictures online of them for 7-8 years, and you can tell looking at them. Well, you can tell they've been around for a while because when you're looking at them, they use Anvis 10 lenses on the front, so it's old. They're not using ground lenses. Like it's a ground. You can tell that it is a beefed up housing to be for ground use, and obviously it has thermal overlay on it. But like when you look at the parts, you can tell like this has been around for a while. So that's where I'm saying you don't really know like what's being used by the military that we don't even know about. And there's also some really cool stuff coming in right now, like the BNVDFs. Like,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are awesome.
And people look at it and they're like, man, how is this 45 grand? And what people don't understand about it is like, dude, this is like the future weapon. Like it has attack integration, GPS on it, like first person point of view through attack. Like it's insane the amount of technology that frankly,
Awesome.
yeah, frankly, I mean like 90% of agencies and people would never use that because it's like, well, okay, yeah, for me to get the most out of this system, like I have to have, I've got to have this goggle. I've probably got to have like an MPU 5. I've also got to have some type of attack, Android device, whatever system it is to integrate that. Then I have to have like multiple friends that have that too. So, yeah, and I know that like even some of the agencies that I've talked to here have said that like they don't even have like whatever it is, the attack system. They're still using the state of Texas one, Texas DPS one. So it's hard for them to use that because whenever they're using it, like anybody with access to the state of Texas system can see where they are,
Right.
can see through their stuff, can see into it's, I don't know, it's still we'll see. I mean, you can definitely see the military applications and it really is the future, but at this point it's still out of reach for most normal people.
Certainly. And the interesting side of that is it's the future. Technology isn't necessarily changing, in my opinion. It's just adapting. So we're putting thermal and we're putting image intensifying night vision together. Where do you see the future of actual night vision going, of tubes?
Man, I could be
It
wrong.
hasn't changed for a long time.
I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to change much because the
Right?
problem.
I don't either.
Yeah, the issue that you get, the issue that you get now, I can take. I will say, like, obviously L3 is not going to tell you like what they're specifically doing, right? But although I don't think analog tube technology is going anywhere, that's not to say that they're not going to continually improve upon their technology. I remember not that long ago, man, like 2 years ago, to get a 40 SNR tube was like holy shit. That's like a once a year
Wow.
type of thing, right? It wasn't that 10 years ago. Like a 27 SNR tube, people were happy with, and nowadays it's like, dude, I get a batch of 25 MNVDs, and like there's like 7, 8, 9 of them are 39 plus.
Wow.
So it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. And this is what's coming to the domestic law enforcement market, right? Like this is all for law enforcement. This isn't what's going to SOCOM. Like, so we know they're getting stuff that's better than they're releasing out to the domestic market and the commercial market. So I think that'll continue to improve. But as with any technology, right? Like there's a reason why you watch a lot of those, like they can't, I was watching a thing the other day on the Sean Ryan show about like how all the watches that they were not allowed to wear in different type of special operations stuff, like any Garmin type of watches, anything like that, because the more they can be hacked. And so the more technology you get, like also the more ability you have to be hacked, the more ability you have for people to mess with it. And it's obviously electronic warfare is a big thing now. Not that I'm like I'm not any expert in military shit, right? Like I'm not at all. I've never been in the military. Like I don't know as much, but anybody that knows, like that's just logical. Like it's gotten to where electronic warfare is a huge thing. It's you can't really hack a tube.
Right.
Like, so that's where I get back to like,
there's no computing power.
Yeah, there's like, I have a hard time thinking that like that technology is going to go anywhere because it's just so simple and it works. I think that, thermal's good if there's ways to integrate it, like in the BMVDF. I think a lot of people overestimate, the capability of a fused thermal like that. Like it's, while it is good for a lot of reasons, like it's nothing like a dedicated thermal unit. Like, I mean, you've dealt with enough thermal, like a good 640 unit, in 5 seconds, you can tell 1,500 yards away if there's something that's, a person standing there.
Yep, certainly.
It's not that way with, even a 640 BNVDF. They just don't work like that.
Yep, that makes sense. And when you're procuring tubes or when you're procuring night vision and you're going over the spec sheet, what really matters to you?
For like
Talked about
for
SNR
matching
a lot.
tubes up or what?
No, just from a perspective of, hey, I don't really care about photocathode sensitivity.
Yeah, I don't. So photocathode is important, right? It is important, but I've always kind of gone by the rule of thumb that like if those photocathodes are ending up in an unlimited tube, then they're probably fine.
What is an unlimited tube?
So it's easier to say what a limited tube is. A limited tube is an export tube. It's a lower performing tube.
Right.
So these are ones that, and now L3's actually gotten so good at manufacturing stuff that they have had to come up with ways to produce limited tubes because their manufacturing is so good now. And so generally speaking, I don't know off the top of my head what the limited tube specs are. They have the same grades as, are different grades. They're not the same as unlimited, but they've got, 16 LMs, 18 LMs, 20 LMs. But they'll generally have a lower photocathode. They'll have higher EBIs. They'll have lower SNRs. They'll have lower, actually I don't know about the resolution. Resolution, they may let any resolution through. But they're generally a lower performing tube. And so, Yeah, if a photocathode's making it into a mil-spec unlimited tube, you don't really need to look at it. It's
Okay.
going to be a good. It's going to be a good photocathode. The same with the luminance gain. Doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it is. I do like to match them up. As close. Decently close.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really like you're not, even if you have a 60 and a 65,000, like you're not going to notice the difference really. But yeah, I try to match them up as decently as I can. Now, at least when I'm matching tubes, like I'm going to go obviously resolution first. You want to be the same resolution, then SNR, closest SNR you can get. Then if I can go there and say, hey, if I can get gain that are kind of close to each other, I'll do that. But I'm not gonna sacrifice like SNR matching for a luminance gain match, if that makes sense. But yeah, those wouldn't matter. The very first thing I would look at is SNR. That's kind of the horsepower of your tube. That's the most important thing by far. That's going to be the overall performance of the tube. Resolution does matter. It depends on like your eyesight. I would say that like you're fine with, most people are fine with 64, even 57, to be honest, dude. Like most people aren't going to notice the difference between a 57. Mil-spec tubes, you're not going to get a 57, but you will get that. You will definitely get that in some like commercial fallout tubes, like 1601s and 1701s for L3. You'll see that. I don't think I've ever seen an XLSH that's 57, but they could be out there. But yeah, the SNR would be the number one thing. Then resolution. I prefer a 72 resolution tube. I wouldn't otherwise, shy away from a 64, but I'd prefer 72. And then, EBI is just honestly not that important. It's something that I would look at, but put it this way. If you have if you went from an SNR of 30 to 40, you're going to notice a huge difference, right? Or even if don't even double it, right? Or don't even go up that percentage. Like from an SNR of call it 30 to 35, 30 to 36, you're going to notice a pretty decent difference.
Oh, wow.
If you go from an EBI of 0.4 to 4, man, you're not going to notice that much of a difference. Like it really is not that big of a deal. Now I will say for resale, like if you have the choice, like for resale, you should be looking for better SNRs because people have read on the internet that, if your SNR is above 1.5, that your ass is going to prolapse and you're going to die. And like, it's just, it's just not true. I mean, I've said, it's like, dude, I'll come put 10 of them on a test set. You tell me what the difference is, and you can't really do it.
Yeah, that's fascinating too. Man, I don't really have anything else for you yet. You think there's anything else that we need to cover?
No, we can keep thinking about it.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. I always have guys that are either chasing SNR or chasing FOM, and they kind of go hand in hand a little bit. But to me, man, no matter what, like some night vision is better than no night vision. And of course, you're going to spend a lot less if you get stuff that's a lower FOM versus a higher FOM. But no matter what, you're still going to be able to see at night.
Yeah. I get it, man. I mean, it's expensive stuff, and especially if you're paying for it like yourself, like you want to make sure you're getting the best. But like honestly, dude, like once you're for unfilmed stuff, once you get past like a 2376 minimum, like the performance returns are like it's diminishing returns, and you lose a lot pretty quickly. So like a 3372 under 2.5 EBI, that's fine. Some people may not want that. I get it, but like, if the difference is paying $1,000 more for a 37 SNR and waiting 6 months, like, dude, just get your night vision and use it. And most people, what you'll actually find out is like, most people, it's like they don't know anything about specs. And they buy night vision, they use it for 6, 8, 12 months, then they get online and somebody tells them their specs suck, and it's like, well, now they don't like the night vision.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly right.
You liked it for, it worked fine for you for how long before, you read that. But,
yeah, totally.
I don't know.
Yeah, I got another one for you along those same lines. You get out and you use your night vision and stuff, and then sometimes you get some scarring in it and whatnot, and then you black box the tube, and you're gonna take the lens caps off of it and turn it on and probably put it in a safe or put it in a bag and put it in a drawer or something. What does that actually do if you can fill me in on it, to the tube when it's in that lowest light environment and it's getting rebalanced?
Man, to be honest, I don't know the science behind what it does. But I will say it has varying levels of effectiveness. You can do it for 100 hours. I mean, you can do it for a long time. A lot of times people don't do it long enough. But yeah, if you do it for 100 hours and it's not fixing itself, that's about like
4 days.
That's about where you're at.
That's crazy.
I've
definitely never done it that long.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, like what I typically recommend to people, like you want it to be as dark as possible. So like I'll get them and wrap them in aluminum foil.
Wow.
Just because it's like no light can get through there. Wrap it in aluminum foil and wrap it in like a towel or something. I'll just put it in my cabinet and leave it there for a couple days.
And when light does scar the tube, that's kind of saying it broadly, is it damaging the microchannel plate? Is it damaging
That I'm not positive.
the phosphor coatings inside?
That I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. I know it damages it.
All right.
I know it damages it. Yeah, I mean, you'll see those burns. But yeah, you'll see those blends. I mean, it's obviously very noticeable compared to like recoil damage. It's very different.
Oh, yeah. So when I've heard stories of people putting PBS 14s on 5.56s, as some kind of like a clip-on in a sense, and then you get that recoil damage, and that's the microchannel plate breaking down, right?
Yeah, it's basically the microchannel plate slapping the
Photocathode?
photocathode.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
And so these units that are like a PVS 30s 50 caliber rated, right? I believe it is. The tube is still the same, yes?
Yeah, the tube's the same, and that's what I've asked this question before. And the interesting part is, so like if you look at a PVS 30, right? So a PVS 30, like a lot of people think there's like recoil mitigation in there. There's not. There's not. I mean, that tube's epoxied in up against aluminum.
There might be some on the mount. The mount might be in a sense.
No. And I did have, it was a guy that was retired, but he had worked at ITTs here in Dallas, and he told me that a tube by itself, I think he said it was a ITT tube was supposed to have recoil, a recoil rating up to 500 joules, which basically translated into a 300 Win Mag out of like a regular hunting rifle, right? I don't know. I mean, I don't disbelieve him, but like I will tell you this: like if it may not happen every time, but like if you put a 14 on a 5.56 and you do it over and over and over, you're going to get recoil damage.
Yeah, certainly.
And I can't tell you why it'll do it in a 14 and it won't do it in a, in a PVS 30, but it doesn't. I mean, it just doesn't. One of my buddies that knows more about clip-ons than forgotten more than I'll ever know. I mean, he said he thinks it has something to do with the extra weight that it adds.
So I was just thinking.
It could be. It could be.
It buffers out that recoil.
Yeah, but you would also think that, a PVS 14, although it doesn't have weight, it also, the plastic in there should give more.
That's a good point.
It should give more than aluminum.
So can you damage the tube in a similar manner that recoil would if you were just setting it down really hard, or if you do bump it into
100%.
something, really? So you wouldn't
100%.
break anything on the housing, or you wouldn't damage any of the circuitry, but you could certainly damage the inside of the tube.
Oh yeah, if you dropped a goggle or something like that, yeah, I mean that could happen.
Wow.
Yeah, that could happen.
That's good to know. Yeah, well, Cameron with Night Vision Solutions. I'm Drew with Downrange Thermal, and yeah, thanks for going all over that with me. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, man.
That's cool. Learned a lot.